What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Alex. You can check him out at mev.com, mev.com. Alex, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. This is, I don't know. I have a top agency series, right? And this kind of falls in that category, but I also have a top software series. And that also falls in that category because you really help companies create software, right? You're the strategic software development partner for these companies. But we'll lump you into both of those. And so on the SaaS side, I had one of the founders of Pipedrive. That was a really good one. Yeah. They had around 10,000 customers when I interviewed them. Now they're over 100,000. Just a crazy winding journey. Yeah, Pipedrive. And then Zapier, one of the founders of Zapier, Wade Foster, that was a good one. And one of the founder of Jotform. And I liked, you probably experienced this with different pricing models with software, but they had a freemium version. And I'm like, how can you have millions of users using freemium? I mean, this costs you real dollars, right? But they had an interesting way of kind of elevating the free users to the paid users, right? And the adoption, everything like that. So those are interesting. And then I have some good on the agency side. I don't know if you get approached at all, Alex, from companies trying to acquire you, but Todd Tasky has what's that? All the time?
All the time.
Yeah.
I get like 2-3 emails a week, probably.
And Todd has a Second Bite podcast, and he helps agencies. He pairs private equity with agencies and helps sell agencies in Second Bite, because sometimes when they sell, they're not retiring. They're just keep doing what they're doing, maybe more of what they're doing, what they like doing. And if and when the private equity sells again, sometimes they've gotten more in the second bite than they've done the first. So that was a good one about the M&A space, the agency space. So check that one out with Todd Tasky. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that in a few ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution and production. Number two, we're an easy button for companies gifting. So we make gifting, staying top of mind to your clients, partners, prospects, even staff from a culture perspective. Simple, easy, affordable. All you do is give us a list of the people. We do everything else. Everything's also branded to your company. And we don't send tchotchkes or things like that, Alex, we're going to throw in the garbage. We actually tend to send food products that I would want to eat. So that's what we send. So we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free for a company to build amazing relationships. Because for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways on how I can give to them. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile someone on my podcast, share with the world what they're working on, and to send them sweet treats in the mail. So you can check it out, rise25.com, or email us at support@rise25.com. I am excited to introduce Alex Natskovich. He's the founder and CEO of mev.com, a global software development services company. Since 2006, so he was doing it before it was like cool to do AI and programming and everything like that. He's partnered with enterprises in healthcare, life sciences, consumer tech, fashion, all over the map. They've worked with companies such as Novo Nordisk, LG, Cartier, and so many more. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you, Jeremy.
I want to get to your background and how you got to the United States, because I know you have an interesting background, and I was looking at your education in metaphysics and analysis of calculational command series, things that I have an issue pronouncing sometimes. But let's start off with just tell people about Mev and what you do.
Yeah, so we're a software development partner. Essentially, we build software for our clients in various different engagement models. We help clients build software products. We help solve problems with software. And our mission is really to help customers win with the right technology. So that's what we aim to do.
How did you get into this?
Well, it's a long and winding road. I've been in like software since I was a kid, basically. I really like computers. It was a very natural fit for me to go into software engineering. I landed my first engineering job in New York quite a bit ago, and I kind of like got frustrated with the way software has been built back in
When
that
did you
day.
move here to the States?
That was 2004, actually.
Okay. What was it like? Tell people where you grew up and what was it like there?
Well, I mean, I grew up, I was born in Soviet Belarus. I sort of like grew up through the 80s and 90s over there. And it was rough. It was not an easy time. The Soviet Union, I don't remember it a whole lot much, but I have some glimpses of how it was. And then the crazy 90s in that part of the world was pretty intense. You had to survive and just, you learn how to get by with very little.
Can
Um,
you like when you say tough and survive a little, very little, like just what's an example of that? Because people listening, I mean, let's say they grew up in the States and you go to a full grocery store and,
no,
rough and tough is always relative, right? So what did that
right.
look like for you?
Well, in the Soviet times, there wasn't really like basically through both 80s and 90s, we had to like grow our own food most of the time. There was, grocery stores you can go there and buy like bread, maybe some basic things like salt. And sometimes there were more products for sure, and it kind of like fluctuated, but it wasn't very easy to. So like getting food was a concern, you had to like invest some time and effort into that part. Then when the Soviet Union fell, it was just like a very challenging time because your money would be devalued like every other week. So like how do you and you get the salary? I mean, I wasn't working at the time, my parents were, but people just had to almost survive in even in the worst way because they couldn't really rely on the rubles being worth the same thing. They had to like again grow their own food and try to get dollars as quick as you possibly can before it get fully devalued. So all of these things were things you just had to deal with. And then on top of that, there was like a lot of crime, a lot of corruption at that time. So it was very unusual time for people to like operate because it was kind of rising capitalism, which, I'm a strong believer in capitalism. But in the 90s in that part of the world, it was very different what we perceive here in the US, these days. So so that was the challenge, you never know like where your next, well, not necessarily where your next meal gonna come from, but like you'll have to take care of it very, very specifically, right?
You can't take it for granted.
You can't take it for
Yeah.
granted for sure. So we had to grow our own food, we had like go and I had I was a kid, but I was herding cows, for example, like during the summertime. So like it's a very interesting time for like me as a
And now you're
person.
in San Francisco. It
Now
was a
in San
lot different
Francisco
from
as
herding
well.
cows.
It's a very big job, yeah. But I think what
How
it gave me though, like it gave you this experience to sort of survive in very different, and it's not like a fake survival type thing. You go to a camp and you try to like make a fire or something, right? It's like a pretty hardcore deal. You have to just, get by on very little things and figure things out. And, when you couldn't go to like store and buy a specific tool, you have to figure out how to do certain things with the tools you have, right? And build stuff and, maintain buildings and things of that
It's
nature.
probably great from like an entrepreneurship perspective, just like
Yeah.
adapting and
Oh,
doing
for
what you
sure.
can with what you got. And how old were you when you moved to the States?
Let's see, 22, I think, something
22.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
And so at what point do you decide, because you were working as a senior software engineer for some companies, at what time point do you decide I'm going to do my own thing?
It kind of happened a little bit accidentally. I was working at a pretty cool startup back at that point in time. And, I was young, I was kind of had lots of free time. And I just came across some guy on a social, well, it wasn't social, it was forums back in the day, right? So it was like some PHP forum. He needed some help for something. And I was like, hey, I can totally do that. So I reached out to him, helped him out. He paid me. And I was like, oh, you can get paid like as a consultant, essentially. I had no idea what any of that freelancing consultant like I was like, oh, like that you can make money this way. That's interesting. And so he kept like coming back to me, asking to do things. And I kept doing stuff a little bit on my own. Then he introduced me to his friend who ran a big agency. Like that guy totally started to like loading me up with work. I had to go out and hire a couple of people, also in like a part-time basis. And so slowly but surely it sort of grew through like introductions and referrals. And at some point it was just made sense for me to sort of move on and start doing that for full time. And that's
And you become, I mean, almost a hiring machine at this point. I mean, you have to bring business in, and then what do you look for? How do you hire a good developer?
Oh man, if I knew the answer to that question, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I probably would just, write a book or run some talk shows or something. It's a hard question. Like it's I think it boils down to first of all hiring good people, which is also a difficult question to answer. So for us, and it took me a long time to realize, but I think corporate values are super important. And for the longest time, I really had this like negative attitude to even the whole concept of corporate values because I thought it's just some sort of like a consulted mumbo jumbo and bullshit, and people just use it as an excuse to like not really do the hard things. But slowly but surely, I came over to the other side, and I believe that it's actually very important to have a definitive set of values that as a founder, as an executive team, define yourself, and also hire to those values, right? And so that is the first and most important question. I think we look even less on like technical talent, although that's important, but just having core values represented in individuals, that is, I think, the fundamental to really hiring good people and building productive teams. And then, beyond that, really just having deep conversations about how things work in engineering, asking people to do simple tasks, you can actually see how they work, right? And then in reality, though, all that stuff works to a degree, but you can only tell after you hired somebody. So we try to organize a little bit of like a trial period to understand, okay, like how does individual work, to really see them in action, and be very, very transparent and very direct in terms of what feedback we provide to people during that time. That's part of our like core values, just being really adult and direct in terms of communications, both with our clients and with our employees, and being very honest about everything. So that I feel that, and a lot of people find it very refreshing, right? The level of transparency, level of directness and honesty. Because oftentimes people work at companies and like the feedback is very sort of like high flying. It kind of like veils the issue. We try not to do it. We go straight, for the problem and try to help people grow as well through that process. So, that's how I think about it. Probably not the best process in the world. There's many alternatives, but we try to kind of keep it that way.
And you have talent all over the world?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have people here in the US and in Europe predominantly. Yeah.
And, one of the biggest things, I'm curious how the niche evolved, right? You start with that one client.
Yeah.
Talk about the evolution of the types of industries that you serve.
I would say first 10 years, it was very accidental in many ways. So we kind of like stumbled our way into healthcare and pharmaceutical space, and that proven to be very deep and very interesting space for me as like an engineer. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of untapped potential. There's a lot of business issues that people could solve with technology. And that's what I think made me passionate early on. Because I love business, like I love everything about like business, capitalism, and how to really it creates goodwill in the world. And so I really come initially from the perspective of understanding the clients, like what the challenge is. And technology really is in service of that. So pharma and healthcare had no shortage of issues and challenges and problems to solve. So it got very interesting for me personally and for us as a company. And so we operated mostly in that space for quite a long time. And then when I moved here to California, San Francisco Bay Area, that kind of we had startups as a clients before that point in time, but I think that really helped us to accelerate our presence in that ecosystem, and really open like a whole new area for us in terms of the business and focus on different niches. So we really started like figure out how we can reorient a little bit from servicing larger companies to servicing startups. It's a different dynamic, and that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years.
I'm curious, Alex, how people work with you and how that's evolved. As I was looking at, because I know people come to you and they be asking different questions like, okay, are you going to be our dedicated team? Are you going to just supply one person?
Yeah.
How does it work? Or maybe where did it start? And now how does it work to work with you?
Yeah. Well, we started kind of since most of our clients were mostly large organizations. we started an agencies at the beginning as well. We started just working on pure kind of like fixed scope, fixed budget model, which was very inefficient. And we evolved that model a little bit, so we still do.
So they would say, we want this project. You're like,
Yeah,
okay, we'll scope it out. It's going to be
exactly.
$200,000 to do this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That and so then it just goes in kind of like phases. And it's very comfortable to them to work in this way because then that's how their budgeting works, And it's frankly works quite well for the types of problems they're trying to solve because they're not really building like a new product, right? They're solving business problems with some piece of software, some piece of technology. So it works decently well. And then when we start working with more of a product companies, right? Companies that build software and then sell it to their clients, this is where we had to introduce other models where now we become their dedicated team or the integrated team. And the difference between these things is subtle, but the outcomes is quite dramatic, right? So when we look at like augmented staff model, it's literally you already have your team, they already, firing all cylinders. You just need extra firepower. So you come to us, we figure out who that is, and we, staff those people. Frankly speaking, this is probably the smallest service that we have in a company. Most of our clients go more into like integrated and dedicated team buckets, so if you will. And so with integrated team is where you have a team or maybe some individuals that may not quite a team yet, maybe it's an early stage company, and we try to figure out how we really create a team that integrates into yours. So we become kind of like a whole team from your individuals and our individuals. Maybe you use our process, maybe we use your process. It's a little bit of it'll take some time to figure out and set up what's efficient. And then dedicated team is where we are your team, right? We are your software product team. We build your product, and we understand it very deeply, so we can be pretty autonomous. You don't have to, have a daily calls with us. You understand we got your back. We understand your business well enough. You kind of delegate certain decision-making process to us. And that level of collaboration takes quite a while to actually develop. But once it is developed, it's a beautiful thing. It works very well. A lot of people don't believe it, that it's actually can operate in this way with a vendor, right? But it could, and we've proven it over many, many years and a number of clients who work with us in this model.
I'm curious on the pricing. How do you decide on pricing? Agencies, okay, we just have we'll scope out the project. That's the fee. We do an hourly. How did you come to your pricing model?
So initially, it evolved over years, and now I have like a fairly, I'm an engineer, you can probably tell. I build like a pretty sophisticated Excel spreadsheet that factors in a bunch of things like, our costs and different benefits and, utilization rates and all certain and all types of things. So depending on the service, it could be, a fixed budget, and we just kind of work towards that budget, right? That's the model we try to use for all of our solutions. And if it's a team, we figure out a monthly run rate, which will depend on, type of people, number of people, the level of allocation, and that's what we charge, right? So it's kind of like if you're a startup, it aligns with your burn rate, and you know what exactly that is. Like, and we dedicate a particular team to build a product. And if it's an enterprise customer and they want to budget, a certain amount of dollars for an initiative, we try to figure out like what that would cost, based on, a mix of people, the hourly rates and things of that nature. So we try to be pretty flexible and cognizant how clients operate and, adjust based to that.
Because I think most people, and that kind of goes in my next question, what people are asking for, because they don't maybe realize what it takes to build something, right?
Yeah.
And so like, well, we just want this simple app, Alex. And you're like, not so simple, right?
Yeah, happens
So
quite often.
we'll get to what people are asking for, but what are some of the misconceptions that you kind of have to explain to people when they come to you, like, this is how it works?
It really depends on the client, Often, I think one thing that I see quite often is just understanding of how much work goes into pushing somebody over the finish line and really putting out like a commercial grade, production grade system in the world. Very often we get clients who are like, oh, it's almost done. It's like 90% done, there's only a little bit of work left here and we need to launch it, right? And so the amount of work that remains in those 10% tend to be quite a bit more than people would expect, right? Because often you just focus on the happy path, right, to make sure it works, but you don't factor in all the conditions under which it should fail gracefully, right, or reject them, or doesn't work. You don't factor in the amount of testing that needs to happen, right, and scalability and security things. And those quite often tend to come at the end. With the projects we do, we actually tend to front load some of those things. So we kind of get them done early. Yeah, but that happens quite often. Just sort of misconception of the amount of work that remains in something to put it out in the world.
What about on the mistake side? Because I'm sure people come to you and go, okay, we actually tried to do this, like we need your help, or maybe they haven't yet. You mentioned something with security. What are some of the mistakes? I mean, like, maybe they haven't built in security. I don't know, some of the most common mistakes you've seen when people are building software.
Yeah, I think it's not really validating your assumptions is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see, like in a product development early on. So just having too many of them. And it's less about technology and it's more about like product adoption. So quite often people fall in this trap where they think that they know what the reaction of market would be.
Hmm.
They want to build something a bit too big. And I always try to push people to like reduce the scope and build smaller things first and then put it out in the market and validate and then iterate. Right. So that's it happens very common, especially with early stage founders. On a more kind of like mature side of things, oftentimes it's really just not really factoring in the amount of kind of test coverage you should have, amount of actually testing you should do to really put like a commercial grade product out. Security, it's gotten better over the years. If we were talking 10 years ago, that was a huge issue. Very, very few companies actually did a good job. Lately, I feel like it's definitely gotten better. And also there are more solutions on the market that help you to do that better. So it's gotten to a better spot. Still, happens and still something to kind of keep in mind. But as security, worries maybe became more covered a little bit, I think there's a new sort of kid on the block, and that's compliance and privacy and data privacy. And so I see quite often companies don't really consider that until they really have to launch. And I'm not talking only about like the EU targeted products. There's different privacy law frameworks here in the United States and California and Colorado, right? And other states also coming up with them. So that's what, especially if a product actually processes private data, they need to consider more of how it is handled. And quite often I see it being kind of like a bit of an afterthought of like, oh, now we have to also do this, but the product is already built. Yeah, so those are some of the examples.
It's interesting, Alex, that you start with not validating assumptions and the MVP piece, because when I think about it, that behavior actually benefits you, right? Because they want all these things and they want to build all this stuff. And you're kind of telling them, in a sense, don't spend more money with me,
Yeah.
right? I mean, ultimately, you're looking for a long-term relationship. So, like, once it's validated and it's actually making money, they
Yeah.
will spend more. But in the short term, you're almost talking people out of building stuff that would,
Yeah, exactly.
that your team would get more work on, honestly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it aligns with our mission, right? We want to help them win, right? And building something that nobody wants is not winning, right? So that's why I'm trying to understand like what is their goal and how we can help them achieve it. And sometimes the way to achieve it is actually very different to what they envision it is. And so my job is really to kind of like realign both the technical strategy and in some cases even business strategy based on like what the goal is, what the constraints are, how the market looks like, right? And so help them in some cases to think it through and really um, make it so they don't make mistakes early on, right? That would kind of kill them essentially. Yeah, so I think it's part of the value that kind of comes for free for working with us, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot of value. I want to know what people are asking for, and I figure maybe we'll talk about a few examples so people can get an idea of like how you work and how you think through the problems and the solutions, and maybe we'll talk about Hawaii Information Service and what you did with them.
Yeah, they are very special clients for us. I think we've built over years a very good relationship with them. So they are an MLS in the state of Hawaii, a couple islands over there. And we started working with them, I want to say maybe 7, 8 years ago, so quite a long time ago. And very quickly, very quickly, I guess by some measures. It took a couple of years probably for us to really get to know them well, to understand the business well, and really help them to sort of re-engineer and re-envision their platform, which is the core product for the modern world. Um, it took quite a bit of time and kind of like different team integrations. Our team
Sort of
went
like
to
agents. Who's the customer for them? Is it
their
real
customers
estate
are real estate
agents?
agents and
Yeah,
brokerages.
gotcha.
They also have other, customers like insurance companies, banks, and things like that. But we work with them very closely to really understand like what the business is about, what different kind of business factors influence it, what standards are there, and through all these years, kind of like work very closely with them to define this new product that they wanted to um, build it and roll it out, which took quite a while, multiple years, as I mentioned. And we tried to be really good partner for them, kind of really deeply understand both constraints that they have, right, in terms of the existing technological stack, the customers, um, also the opportunities given like what's going on in the market, what do some of the competitors look like, right? And the longer term vision for a product like this. So it took, a number of different strategic sessions that we had with them over the years. We try to have it every year and sort of realign the roadmap. And I think it puts us a little bit beyond like a typical software vendor where we're really working with them together to design, define, like and deliver their vision for the an MLS in the modern world.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah, it's quite complex.
How did they find you?
So we had an employee who actually worked there for many years. For I believe about a decade he spent there, if I'm not mistaken. And so after that, he lived there in Hawaii as well. He came to us, worked with us for a little bit. And after some time, he introduced us to them. And so I stayed in touch with them for a few years. And when the time when we were right, we started working on a small project with them. And then, they liked working with us. And, from there on, it grew.
I'm curious, you know, I'm sure you get a lot of companies that they already have a big team, right?
Right.
And so I'm curious, what do people have to be aware of internally for a company to go, hey, we need to call Nev, right? Because I guess I see on one hand, a developer doesn't want to be like, I don't know. In general, people don't love asking for help. And like, oh, I got this. I'll just do this. What are some of the signs internally that um, they should call you? Or is it staff just saying, I am overwhelmed. You want me to do these 72 things, and I can't handle it? What does that look like internally for a company to call you?
Yeah, it's all of the above, I would say, right? There are situations where there's definitely lack of capacity, what I call, right? So you have a few employees and they just overwhelm with everything that needs to be done, right? But it still needs to be done, so somebody needs to do it. Hiring people takes a long time. Hiring right people takes even longer, right? And organizing them in a productive software development team that takes quite a bit of time. But you need productivity and get things done pretty fast. So that's definitely one use case when people reach out to us where they just need extra firepower. They need us to come in and kind of deliver. Another situation is less common, I would say, but it happens, is where executives or engineering or product leaders just gets frustrated with the team that they have. And we come in and as professional as we'd like to be, in some ways we kind of like taken over what other teams couldn't deliver for a variety of reasons. And quite often it's actually not the fault of those teams. It's actually quite the fault of the executives and product leaders, and we try to really help them navigate towards the model where all of us work together in a productive fashion. So we try to help them to sort of undergo a little bit of a transformation of their engineering teams, maybe with our help. We sort of serve as a good example of like how do you really have a good development practices, right? A solid delivery practices, how you really build a good code and help them to sort of internalize some of those things and really increase productivity of an internal teams as well. So sometimes we serve as that like a good example, especially for teams maybe that are a little bit, younger in the sense that they haven't been really working together for a very long time. They haven't really developed like high degree of cohesion, right? They don't really know how to apply some of the more modern development approaches and delivery approaches. So sometimes we're in that position as well. Other times it's really just, hey, I have my team, they're really busy with something, and I want you guys to actually take a bunch of things off the plate so I can focus them on something that is higher value, you know, because they're here, they're local, I see them every day. Like I can iterate and innovate much faster with them, but they bogged down by a bunch of minutia, by a bunch of operational things. So I want you guys to take care of that so that I can innovate with my team. And so that the model that we support as well, that the model that we see quite often.
I'm curious, Alex, you're working in a lot of different softwares and things like that. What is your preferred tech stack? Like, what do you use a team to communicate internally, externally? What are you using? What are some of your favorite apps and software that you use?
For sure. I mean, from technology stack, it sort of changes with different eras. We started out as like a PHP shop. We moved to Java and .NET and Python. And these days we do most of the major stacks. I think Node.js and React is probably the most popular last few years. So we have a lot of focus on that domain. In terms of communication stack, we've tried different things over years. I think lately we've mostly settled on like Atlassian suite of products, so the Jira Confluence. It's quite complex, but also quite robust. So you need to kind of like know what you're doing in it to set it up efficiently, but we're able to do that. And then we use Slack, email, nothing really like that exciting or magical. We fairly classical, I guess, in that regard. No, we try to like integrate some AI tools lately, but very mostly experimental at this point. I would kind of describe us as like a not very cutting edge in terms of these tools, but trying to be cautious but optimistic about different technologies. So we experiment with a lot of different things on an ongoing basis, but we promote them to like a production, let's call it, very carefully. After we consider them, after we really understand how that will impact our workflows or client workflows or things of that nature. We don't want to introduce something that we haven't really tested thoroughly, and we don't really know how it will behave under like a stress of users, processes, clients. We want to make sure everybody stays productive.
I'm curious what tools you're experimenting with from the AI side. You're very close to this.
Yeah.
I think in the future, whenever that is, a lot of these tools that we use all the time will integrate the AI tools. I don't know if I'll necessarily have to go directly to ChatGPT to do something because it's maybe integrated into whatever I'm already using. But what are you experimenting with from the AI standpoint?
I lost you for a
Oh,
second.
I was like,
Sorry.
what are you experimenting with from the AI, different AI tools you're using?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of falls into two different buckets. One on the delivery side, so essentially engineers and QA and infrastructure folks. We experiment with a lot of agents and copilots. Initially, it was like GitHub and Cursor. Now we're using Cloud Code quite a bit, Codex. So those things we use quite judiciously for certain cases where it makes sense. We use them a lot. For other cases, not so much. We try to really kind of like measure what the productivity impact, what is a good use case for them, and really kind of define. And it's changing over time so quickly, it's kind of a bit hard to stand up. But those are things that we use in development the most, I would say. In terms of other parts of the company, it's really, I think one thing that we really kind of start using very heavily early on is different call note takers. And I personally experimented with a bunch of them. I used Fireflies and TLDV and Granola. We have Gemini as well from Google, right? So my current kind of preferred weapon of choice is Fireflies. I tried it first, and then I went to something else, and now I sort of like back with that tool. I don't know. Maybe I just got used to it. It's hard to tell which one is better, to be honest with you. But there are like a few things that annoy me in the other one. So I think that one is probably it's more of a personal taste at this junction, Like they all seem to be relatively similar for my use case. Notion AI, we've experimenting with a little bit. That seems to have a very big promise, but not sure if it's really. And then without even doing anything separate, both Atlassian and Google, and Slack, they all introducing AI tools in their suites of products. So we kind of like testing them out as well as they improve them and getting better. I think some of them are kind of a little bit too early to be useful, but they definitely getting better. So I foresee them being quite powerful in the next few years.
I'm curious if there's any for fun that you use. Like one that I've experimented with was Suno. I don't know if you've seen it, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can, yeah, I think one of my guests, I created a rap song for him
Yes.
about his company using Suno. If you haven't heard of Suno, check it out. But
Yeah. No,
it
I
basically,
tried.
like you've used it before. It's
Yeah.
like amazing how good it is creating a song for
Yeah.
about something with the genre of music.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the same. I did a rap song with my kid about capybara. So it was fun. It was lots of fun. I think sort of not for any work stuff, but I use AI with my kids to do those, silly things,
Yeah.
maybe like a silly image or a poster, or great songs or some videos. It's fun. I like that.
Uh,
For study as well, a little bit, every now and then my kid goes to math school, so every now and then there's a problem that like, I don't really know how to solve it. So I go to ChatGPT and
you
ask it
know,
to
there's a
help.
problem if you can't solve a math
Oh
problem.
yeah, well,
So,
I'm getting old, so
no, I know I did the same thing. I like, so didn't you know this? I'm like, no. So I just took a picture of it, put it in ChatGPT, and it gave me a step by step, and
yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah. But it's good. I've relearned math with help of ChatGPT, so I like it. Very.
Um, Also, so that was Hawaii Information Service. You also work with Lumigro.
Yeah.
What was the use case there?
It was a great company. They were building this light with a controllable spectrum. So essentially, it's an industrial agricultural lighting system where you can control the spectrum of the light, and by that affect biology of the plant. So it's a bit of a research project. Started as a research project, then they moved to be, actually like a manufacturer of those lights. And we came in when they were going through the process of really revamping their software. So we helped them to rewrite a good chunk of their stack, kind of move it to the cloud, update the firmwares, implement like a mesh networking system on Bluetooth, because it was all based on Wi-Fi, which had some problems for very large deployments, where you have like a lot of lights all trying to connect to the same access points. So we changed all that and rewrote it to have, mesh network, kind of elect a one or two different nodes that communicate with Wi-Fi and other nodes communicate with their nodes. It's a really cool project from that perspective. It was pretty kind of technical. And we helped them quite a bit. We became like we have the core team. They only had like one engineer on their end at some point, and we're building the entire, hardware, firmware, firmware for hardware, right? And cloud components as well.
I actually just hardware and like companies that have hardware and software, it's got to be
Yeah.
so difficult.
Well, we don't build hardware, right? But we
No,
work
I
with.
understand. It's just like there's so many, like I
Oh
think
yeah,
of my Aura ring. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, I'm in the gym, it's like slamming against a weight. So the hardware's got to hold up, but the technology inside of it's got to hold up too. And those are two, I don't know, difficult problems to solve, I think. And it's got to connect to the phone, and there's just so many
Yeah.
moving pieces there.
And once you solve it, then you have to manufacture it, which adds like a whole nother layer of things. It is very difficult to manufacture things that are like on a cutting edge of technology. But the good trend that I'm seeing lately is actually there's more manufacturers here that are appearing, like literally in the Bay Area, that do hardware. Um, and that's a pretty good trend. It's much easier to work with companies and who do hardware manufacturing with the local, because you can go there, you can spend some time with them pretty easily, you know. And oftentimes, like in your prototypes, you get something wrong, it has to be changed, or it doesn't really have the right component that has to be replaced, and that component requires introduction of some code changes. So that cycle could really push out your launch by quite a bit. And if you have everything kind of like in one place, more or less, and you can iterate much faster, that's really a good way to kind of keep those deadlines and keep things moving.
Alex, how do you think AI has changed kind of the development landscape? I heard you talk about this a little bit
Yeah.
online, and you're like, people were saying whatever years ago, AI and all this stuff is going to replace developers.
Yeah.
And, how have you seen AI change the
Yeah.
development
I've
landscape?
been thinking about that a lot. I think Well, for us, AI, first of all, changes how clients perceive what software development is and also how they engage with us. So before, kind of like pre-AI, pre-ChatGPT days, mostly clients would come to us and maybe they have like a clickable prototype. In best case scenario, most times it's sort of a loosely defined spec, maybe 1 or 2 pages that sort of just outlines the idea. So we had to go through like a pretty deep discovery. We had to define every minutia and a little detail about how things should work, right? Sometimes draw those designs. These days, we get a lot of clients who essentially already done a bunch of vibe coding on their own. And the best ones, they don't really consider that as like a finished product, but they consider as a new medium of communicating what they want in their vision. And I personally really like that because it means that they already done a lot of cycles of thinking things through and seeing what doesn't work. And they done that with AI and it costed them very little, most likely. So they come to us with a fairly fleshed out vision of what the system should be and how it should work. It may not work, or it may work somewhat, but not ideally. And they have no illusions about it most of the time. They understand that like a lot of things have to be rewritten, or it might actually need to be written completely. But they have a very clear idea in their head, and we have a clear idea of what it should do and how it should operate. So it helps us just to do our job better and cuts down on that initial sort of discovery cycle. So that's one thing that's a pretty big change, I think. Recently, I started seeing a lot more AI written product requirements. And it's an interesting trend. Personally, I feel if clients do that, it could backfire a little bit because oftentimes
They
they
want
also
you to
don't.
build AI into their product.
No,
Is that right?
they wrote requirements with AI and they sometimes fail to read them very carefully. And so in those requirements, there lies something that I actually didn't want, but they tell us to do it. And when we do it, they realize, oh, actually, I didn't want that, but it was written by AI in it. So they waste, money and time doing that. So that's not a very good trend. I feel like it's actually going to go through some stabilization periods. And there are some products on the market that actually help you to do it better, like ChatPRD is one example, where you can, define your product and product vision and product requirements much better with AI. So I think it'll take some time to kind of
Yeah.
like stabilize that. And then the other part of it is really clients who are trying to um, either integrate AI in their product or ask us to use AI so we deliver things faster. And so for this latter one, it works sometimes, but not all the times. And so we try to be like very careful about where we use it and where we don't use it. But we're very collaborative with the clients to really figure out like how we can use it effectively, right? Because many times people have a little bit of like a fantastical idea of what AI can do. And oftentimes when you're actually building a commercial grade product, it's not the case. It will require a lot more engineering that people perceive. And a great example of that actually is self-driving cars. Think about like how long it took them to get on the streets. Literally 15 years ago, people were talking about this, that next year we're going to launch it. And here we are. Yes, they're there, but they still pretty early. It's only in some limited geographies. So that I think is a good cautionary tale about complexities of integrating AI into your product.
Yeah, I had one of the founding engineers at Mobileye. I don't know if you've heard of Mobileye,
Of course.
that eventually got purchased by Intel for, I don't remember, $13.2 billion or something. But it was like one chip that started off as one of those things when you'd pass a truck and it would blink so
Hmm.
that, a truck would know not to, so it reduced accidents, et cetera. And that's kind of where
Yeah.
the technology started. And then obviously got integrated into like more self-driving car capability. So yeah, super interesting. And I had Maurice Novo on, and he was talking about the ethical dilemmas of having self-driving cars, right? And so it was an interesting conversation. I'm curious too, Alex, minimum project size. People are thinking, oh, maybe it's like, oh, should maybe call MEV. I know you have a wide range of types of projects. Is there like a minimum project size that, makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of prototyping and MVP work, and for those we generally try to stay above 10,000. So that, between 10 and 20, I think this is where most of the smaller ones fall. It's just hard for us to do anything productive or useful kind of like below that level, but sometimes we can. So I don't really have like hard and fast rules about that. Most of like commercial grade products, things that go into actual real paying customers that need to be really solid, we typically try to start around 50K. So that's where, most of those systems land. Um,
Alex, I have one last question. First of all, thanks for sharing your knowledge, your journey. It's been a winding road, which is cool. And people can check out your website at mev.com to learn more. It's a great domain, by the way. Just who are some of the mentors? Are there any mentors you've had
oh, of
in the
course.
business world that have helped you and maybe some advice they've given you?
I grow friendly with a lot of our clients, and many times they become kind of like mentors to me personally and to the company. And so I'm super grateful for everybody who encountered in our journey. I learned a lot from different business operator, business owners, founders, executive teams. I had a few different coaches throughout my career. So I have a executive coach who helps me through different difficult situations. And I have, I've been lucky to have a few friends who's really maybe a little bit ahead of me on their journey in terms of running businesses and building businesses. So they all have been like instrumental to me. And I think that's really something that I wasn't paying enough attention when I was younger. So I pay a lot more attention to that now when I'm older, which is maybe a little bit counterintuitive because I know a lot more now. But the more you know, the more you understand how little you know. So I think that helps me to sort of keep an open mind and really rely on my friends and my coaches and clients for some of the wisdom and just really observing what people do and trying to learn from other people's mistakes and successes as well. And being kind of humble about that, I think that's kind of my modus operandi.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting and it's pretty cool that you get to work inside of all these different businesses and
Yeah.
see how they work, see how, they're successful and what works, what doesn't work. So everyone could check out mev.com, check out more episodes of the podcast. And Alex, thanks so much. We'll see everyone next time.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. Bye.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.